All right, we're here again. Thank you all for coming, and Shabbat Shalom. When we conceived this 80th, we wanted to make the talks a little different and give more time for people to talk and fellowship. And Dr. Tabor gave me this title, which then I had to fit my knowledge into, which is unusual. Here's the solution. What was the problem? So the spiritual dimensions of music in the Hebrew Bible in our modern time. So this whole talk is simply about this. The Hebrew Bible, music is a big deal. We're going to talk about that. And as time went on, millennia I'm talking about, the influence of the Hebrew Bible grew immensely. From a band of Israelites to a band of Jews to a band of other radicals, Christians, Muslims. And so the Hebrew Bible is the basis of the religions of Abraham. And it then spilled over into even Eastern religions. So what we need to do is kind of look at that. What are the morals and ethics, and what is it trying to say, and how did it influence music? And that's what this talk's going to be about up to the modern day. So as I said, this is an exegesis of the Hebrew Bible. It's just a commentary about the impact of Hebrew scriptures throughout the ages. The vastness of this subject would take several volumes of books, which we're not going to go through here today. I present some examples, but they are just going to be ones that I chose to pick out. There are many, many, many examples, and I can't go through all of them. Also in my slide presentation, there's some slides that have a lot of words and they're meant to be references for you, so I'm not going to read through them all, but if you want this presentation, it'll be up on the United Israel website. So this gives a little more of the references. And you can disagree or agree based on your own life and what happened. But this is my view, and I've been doing music for a long time. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a home where my mom and dad were extremely musical, and we had lots of records ranging from my mother's love of opera and her love of Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett to my dad's love of music that was, he was older than the music. Well, he liked big band, but then he was into Elvis, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, Roy Clark, all these great people. And he loved the Kingston Trio and played those songs that were banned by the Catholic Church. And of course, he didn't realize he was a Dylan fan. And my dad, of blessed memory, he passed away in 2019. He was born in 1929. But he left me that legacy, and he spent a lot of time getting me lessons for the guitar and buying my first really beautiful guitar. So there's an impact, and it's what you leave behind sometimes that goes forward. So this is kind of my view at a very high level. The origin, this is the power from the Most High, the power of all powers. It comes to us, but there's a prism because we're not on that same level of consciousness. And then the responses vary all over the place. So there's a whole spectrum of responses. And that to me is what's happening in the world today. There are tens of thousands of sects of Christianity, multiple Jewish sects, multiple Muslim sects, and so forth. So the word that originally came to Abraham and then say to Moshe, that is kind of spread out in ways that people don't even realize. It covers the world. So the Hebrew Bible has impacted many, many religions, even Eastern religions. And so it's not something that's just specific to 16 million Jews or 2 billion Christians. It's everyone on the planet. And how that happened is through art, and we're going to talk about that. I'm not going through all these things, but the biblical moral and ethical teachings, monotheism, the 10 words, the golden rule, justice and righteousness, care for the vulnerable, right? These are all things that the Hebrew Bible talks about, and I left some Bible verses in there for you. Honesty and integrity, that's really something that is really difficult to deal with in your life. Forgiveness and repentance. the Sabbath and rest, the stewardship of the planet. We have to take care of this planet and its environment and the well-being of animals. People don't think of that as being part of the Hebrew Bible, but it is. And of course, family and community. And my family, very few of them believed as we believed, but they're still family. And there's community, and there's people that need help, and that's what we did in our lives. So start with a song. What about love? Who knows that song? There's so much love in the Hebrew Bible that's just missed. God's love for humanity, the number one and most important thing, and all people, not just a certain sect of people. The love for God that we have is talked about. The love of our neighbors, and we don't necessarily need to like them, but love is really a deep thing. Love within the family, love for strangers and foreigners, and marital love and respect. And of course, as I say, love is a many splendored thing, love and forgiveness. And if you read that Psalm 103, it's really powerful. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. He will not always accuse, nor will he harbor his anger forever. He does not treat us as our sins deserve, or repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, El Elyon, the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. I'm glad to read that, given my life. Vincent, who knows that song? Anyone? Vincent. So it's the concept of art, and I'm not going to read through all these. It's the concept of art. So what is that? Well, it's extremely complex and multifaceted, and it's almost as difficult to say as what love is. But there are many ways to express this. Dr. Tabor talked this morning about the idea of we're the only people who really understand art, the only beings. There's something, an elephant can paint a picture and certain apes can do things. But in general, our love and our understanding of art, our protesting through art, our worshiping through art, and I don't mean just music. There's all kinds of art that's out there. We'll talk about that in a minute. It serves many purposes. Hey, we just want a beautiful building or a beautiful synagogue. Or, hey, we want to make a statement and so on and so forth. So it's extremely subjective and individual. And so when we talk about art, there's probably as many people are in this room. There are different views about art. I certainly don't agree with the music that Patty always wants to listen to. And if I start broadening the horizon, she leaves and goes to bed. So art for art's sake. Who knows that song? Art for art's sake. It's kind of a modern rock song. Okay, types of art. These are the kinds of art that there are. And this isn't all of it. I can't expound upon all of what art is. But there's the differences that we have. And, I learned to love opera because of my mother. I didn't understand a word of those Italians were saying, but it sounded passionate. And I love the music, the arias that led in, They were just so brilliantly written. Stand-up comedy is art. There's all kinds of things, if you've ever been to performance poetry. So there's all these types of issues that compose what art is. So I'm going to focus in on music as an art form, again, because of the lead-in by Dr. Tabor with this title. And so we know the Psalms are definitely music. We know that for sure. And the complexity of those poetic songs is just incredible. They talk about praise of God, calling for help. All types of subjects are covered. Asking for forgiveness, Psalm 51. And then there are canticles in the Hebrew Bible, and we're going to go over some of those. And of course, the Bible explains its instrumentation. And we've one year had a talk on the instruments of the Bible, and it was quite incredible. And of course, the choirs and musicians are identified in the Hebrew Bible. There are some rabbis, who on the mystic side say that the Almighty sang the Torah into existence. And from my side, as a scientist, one of the things that really impressed me was that we believe now The lowest particles are strings, and they vibrate at different levels. So guess what? This is a song we're living in. Again, you don't have to believe that, but I do. And I've communed with some of the greatest string theorists in the world, and just by writing them, and they wrote me back, and they're like, that's not impossible. So what are some of the canticles in the Hebrew Bible? Well, there's a lot of them. I'm just going to list some of them. The Song of Moses, the Song of Miriam, Song of Deborah, Song of Hannah. You notice how the women are being treated here? Song of David, Song of Solomon, which is a very erotic song. And that's what I love about the Hebrew Bible. It doesn't, the erotic feelings we have for our spouses is something that God created. It's not to be ashamed. Song of the Vineyard. Well, everyone has to go out there. No. Song of the Suffering Servant. The Lament of David over Saul and Jonathan. And there's a whole orchestral piece written about this. The Blessings of Moses, which we saw last night. The Song of the Holy Children. The Song of Habakkuk and the Prayer of Jonah. There are others, but because we read it in English, we don't get how beautiful the poetry is and that it's music. Another thing that a Jewish friend of mine said that really resolved with me is that throughout the years, the Jewish folks have taught their children how to read Hebrew. And the Hebrew in the Hebrew Bible goes from very simple Hebrew to very complex Hebrew. And when you teach a young child that, they begin to see language and communications in a much deeper way. And as I was talking to Bob Jacobson, how few Jews there are in the world and how many Nobel Prizes they have. It's amazing. And how many great musicians are Jewish. We'll talk about some of those. And so it's a good thing about their blessing. So beyond the Hebrew Bible, and I'm not going to read through all this, but we first started having, in the Second Temple period, evidences of the Levites leading services. And some of that is really impressive. And it's started to get extra biblical. It wasn't just the Bible. And then, of course, in Jewish liturgical music, there's all kinds of growth of, like what they would call their gospel songs. And it grew and still goes to this day. And it's many different ways that this split across the world. Of course, in the early Christian tradition, as it split off from Judaism, we saw the Psalms and other biblical texts set to music. And again, this is a direct impact of that Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. And then as those traditions grew over time, millennia, I might add, there's all kinds of compositions that have been created, themes, texts, stories, and stuff from the Middle Ages when, Bach, the genius that he was, went in and started playing on an organ and went home and wrote it all down after he played all day. And he meant these fugues, and he started what became classical music, and then to Beethoven, to operas, to plays, and then to what's called secular music. I might add to those that are not understanding the history of music, to the classical musician, and I have to qualify that, classical is only a certain period of music. Then it became neoclassical. So I'm going to call it the symphonic music. To those people, the geniuses that run the orchestras, there's only two types of music. There's their music, and then there's folk music. And it doesn't mean just Bob Dylan. It means everything else. So songs like blues, jazz, country and western, true folk, rock and roll, electronica, that's folk music to them. And you got to understand that when they say folk music, they don't mean Pete Seeger necessarily. So that's something you got to get up on. So, Into the Mystic, who knows that song? The impact is huge. Besides the classical music, when I say that, you mean all symphonic. It impacted opera, jazz, rock, pop, hip-hop. I'm going to show you some hip-hop songs. You will not believe what they said in there, and I don't mean in a bad way. Blues, reggae was really big, folk, Latin salsa, klezmer, and world music. And one night, Patty and I got to see some klezmer music with Yitzhak Perlman. And what happened was this. We weren't going to go. And then I said, let's go. We'll just get in the nosebleed seats. So I called the box office and said, we have 2 seats in the front row right in front of him that will sell to you at price because the people dropped out. So we get there and we watch Yitzhak come up with his canes and everything, and he sits down. And when that man picked up that violin, I guess it became a fiddle at that point, that band jumped in, and it was Jewish jazz. And it was so amazing to hear this man. It just blew my mind, and I'm watching this genius because he was genius. And he smiled and laughed the whole time, and he recalled stories of his childhood. It was beautiful. So there's a lot in classical music. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there, but I want you to have these things. Job from Ralph Vaughan Williams, The Binding of Isaac, Igor Stravinsky. If you want to listen to some intense strings, Stravinsky. The Burning Fiery Furnace, Benjamin Britten. Moses and Aaron, Schoenberg, of course. Elijah, Felix Mendelssohn. Israel and Egypt, Samson, Solomon, Esther, Saul, Belshazzar are all George Frederick Handel or Horatios based on the Hebrew Bible. The Creation by Haydn, David and Jonathan, and Absalom. These are just ones I picked out because there are so many. But talk about being influenced. These are about the biblical stories. And one of the things we know is that biblical stories were passed on through talking and storytelling and also music. And let me give you an example in your life, right? When you learn the ABCs, you learn it to a melody, and you never forget that melody, and so on. So these are things that I wanted to, bring out. Of course, Beethoven, there's even thought about what his name really means. Beethoven. His Ninth Symphony, the Ode to Joy, it's not about the Bible, but it's about the concepts of the Hebrew Bible. And when you hear that, the 4 parts being done by the New York Symphony with their choral arrangements, you'll just start crying. If you're an atheist, after you hear that, you're going to just, and even if it's in German, I read the Ode to Joy. I could ask Ross now, he's learning German. Johann Sebastian Bach, of course. Wolfgang, he did a lot of music. Verdi, Mayer, Britten. There's many, many more. But if you look at some of these, if you download this presentation, and just go on YouTube and search on their names, and you'll see the impact I'm getting to of the Hebrew Bible. And it's not that they're used for prayer services or praise. They're just pieces of art that people go, they get their champagne, they sit in their seat, they have their glasses, and they watch these genius musicians go off and do this. And it's amazing. There's a quick story I got to tell you because my birthday is March 24th, and Beethoven introduced his Ninth Symphony on March 24th in London for the people who paid him to write it. And he could barely hear, but he started the performance just like I did this morning or this afternoon, and it screwed up. And he stopped it, and he said, "From the beginning." Because you're talking to the genius that wrote it, and he lost his hearing, and he put his ear on the piano so he could hear things. 104 piece, and if you ever want to listen to Beethoven at that level, go to the Hanover Band. That's what they called him back then. And they spent 20 years recording all 9 symphonies from all these greats around the world. And you can hear how Beethoven would have wanted it. So a lot of modern music, and I'm going to get into a lot of these, inspired by the Hebrew Bible, and we don't realize this. Of course, Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds. Rivers of Babylon by Boney M. Go Down Moses, a traditional African-American spiritual that talks about the Israelites out of Egypt. Samson, The Battle of Evermore by Led Zeppelin. We'll talk about that later. But Adam and Eve by Paul Anka. And there's, I had a list of like 3,000 and I just had to cut them. And these aren't the most famous one. This little beautiful, I just had to bring this up. One day, I was working just north of New York City. I'm sorry. And No one wanted to go out to dinner. So I drove up the Hudson a little ways, and I saw a river cruise. Dinner, $20. So I get on the boat. There's a whole bunch of people, and they're going to talk about improving the economic or the ecology of the Hudson River. So we're sailing. I noticed it was a very vegetarian, vegan, and I didn't even know that term back then. This is like 1989. And there was plenty of alcohol, though, because that's vegan. And I get done, and there's this old man playing at the back of the boat.
Oh my gosh.
So I sat down next to him. I knew every song that he played because my mom and dad played them. It was Pete Seeger. And I sat there talking to him. I didn't know it was him. I thought it was just some old, Jesse Slocum kind of guy. And I get up, and he held my hand. He said, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for caring about the Hudson River." I said, "You're a pretty good singer." He goes, "I wrote a few songs." Something like that. And I'm walking off the boat. I didn't know it's Pete Seeger. I'm walking off the boat, and I said, "Who is that guy? I'd like to hear more." And they go, "That's Pete Seeger. This land is your land." I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of songs. This is right from the book of Ecclesiastes, right? I mean, this is the 3rd chapter. And he made it into this song. It was a anti-war type of song that the Byrds made extremely famous. Sorry about that one. Some modern music you wouldn't understand. Genesis, Supper's Ready. It's about the Garden of Eden to the Apocalypse. Noah's Ark by Coco Rosie, and it's about the Great Flood. Jacob's Ladder. Well, there's 2 of them. I put in Huey Lewis, but Rush also did a song called Jacob's Ladder. Right out of the Bible, the concepts. Of course, I can only say Exodus by Bob Marley and the Wailers. I mean, beyond that, he did so much, did so powerful in a very Hebrew way. But, it is a beautiful song. First time in 1995 when Patty and I went to Israel, we're working for a company, Advanced Logistics Development in Rishon LeZion. We went out to a bar afterwards, and this is the first song I heard in Israel. Exodus at the bar. And I crank it, and they're crank the whole album. Patty didn't care for it too much until she got my CD, and then she never stopped playing it, and I got so sick of the thing. All right. Delilah, Tom Jones. It's about Samson and Delilah. And people don't even know that when they listen. The Gates of Zion by Culture. And there's many more. I'm going to get a little more focused here. One of my favorites is a Cohen, Leonard Cohen. And of course, Hallelujah, which we're going to play tonight. Everyone knows that. But you know he had the story of Isaac? You know that song? Samson in New Orleans? He was talking about Ross. No. But this song not only talks about Samson in the book of Judges, but it connects to modern day themes of societal and environmental destruction. That's how deep Leonard Cohen is. He mixed these songs up. What I learned is you just don't cut your hair. Okay. And if you want to get deep into Cohen, you want it darker, baby? I was drinking one night when I first put that on. It was his last album, James. Powerful album. It speaks to my soul. And they believe that it's various parts of the Bible, but the Genesis when God calls upon Abram to offer Isaac. And of course, and I've looked for this, and it's really difficult to find, but he had a song called Isaiah, and it's not recorded, but he used to do it live. And it's kind of like if you saw him do that, it was a special show. I can't find anything about him doing that. Powerful song about redemption and the Messianic era to come. Leonard Cohen. Then there's Bobby, because I have to talk about that. Wow, there's a lot of them. Highway 61. You know what that's about, right? God said, "Go kill me a son." And Bobby said, "Where do you want this killing done?" And he said, "On Highway 61. Does anyone know what Highway 61 is? I know you do. Highway 61 is where the blues was born. And it became from the experience in the fields, they started singing these blues songs. Famously, Robert Johnson codified it, and of course they said he sold his soul to the devil. A hard rain's going to fall. That's has a lot to do with the story of Noah and the great flood. All along the watchtower, which people think, Jimi Hendrix, who really did do a great job. But that's about the watchtower in the book of Isaiah. In his Christian era, he did gotta serve somebody. But guess what? That's just true, because we do have to serve somebody. And the greatest leader is a servant leader. Every grain of sand, which I'm going to sing tonight, it talks about what it means when you're tempted. And it's powerful. And then, of course, ring them bells, which I believe is a clarion call. And I believe as I've gotten deep into this song and the lyrics, I believe it is amazingly prophetic and deep. Yes. He just, the muse from heaven just touched him and said, Bobby, you got to sing this one. And it's amazing. I'm going to keep up with Bob, and there's a lot of it, but I'm just going to be good with it. Blowing in the wind, and it references the dove, and the book with when Noah kept sending the doves out. How many seas must they sail before she sleeps in the sand? You listen to Bob. He was connected. Of course, with God on our side, talks about, hey, you're going to use God to kill people? Really? You're going to start wars? And this is more of an esoteric thing, but I dreamed I saw St. Augustine. And it's really influenced by Ezekiel. I heard him talk about this. And of course, it is very powerful. When he returns, it could have been about Jesus, but it's about the Messiah and never mentions Jesus. Okay? Of course, man gave names to all the animals. It's about the garden when man, he said, what do you want to call this one? And Bob is playful, and it's just a beautiful song you can play for your kid. And if you want to get real deep, Joker Man. And that's when he left Christianity. And if you want to know what he thought, try to figure that song out. It's really a powerful song. Johnny Cash. Well, we just found out from Morgan that he was an Italian of Italian descent. That's amazing. So there's a lot of famous ones he did, but Belshazzar, Moses, he had a song called Noah's Ark, Father and Daughter, Father and Son, which is about Abraham being tested by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. And when the roll is called up yonder, and it's really got a lot of what's in Isaiah and Daniel. And this is roots music. This is American music, and it's because they read the Bible and they understood it. Maybe not like we do, but this is the impact of what we looked at. A lot of country music is, and I had to be careful because a lot of it slides into Christianity, but Dolly Parton, A Coat of Many Colors, you know what that's about, right? Turn the Page by Waylon Jennings, which talks about redemption and forgiveness, and he references Isaiah. So these people must have read the Bible at one time to have this impact. Jacob's Ladder by Mark Willis, Moses by Patty Loveless, and it's about Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. Of course, In the Garden, Loretta Lynn, which is a very traditional hymn which she did, which is talking about the biblical Garden of Eden. And we know that, we want to get back to the garden. It's just, how do we get back there? Because we lost our way. R&B music is very powerful and very spiritual a lot of times. The Rivers of Babylon, even though that was reggae, it's been done by a lot of R&B people. People Get Ready by the Impressions. That's where Curtis Mayfield talked about getting ready, getting on the train to the promised land. We're going to play that song tonight. A Change Is Going to Come, Sam Cooke, another great book, a great song. And of course, His Eyes on the Sparrow by Lauryn Hill. And that's about that God even cares about the littlest of animals and all consciousness, right? So that's some more of it. Wade in the Water. This is a traditional African-American spiritual, often performed in a gospel and R&B style, and it's been recorded by many artists, and it's about the how to reach freedom when you're in Egypt. Brighter Day, and that's Kirk Franklin, which is usually very Christian, but it talks about the future, and it references prophetic books of the Hebrew Bible. Take Me to the King, and again, that's another song that kind of is playing on the idea of the Psalms and the Messiah. Did you know that jazz is influenced by this too? Because people don't even listen to jazz, but it's an amazing form of music. The Creator has a master plan by Pharoah Sanders. Oddly enough, he named Pharaoh. Ali by Dave Brubeck. Again, Psalm 22. Avodah by Max Roach. And this talks about work and service. The Song of Songs by Ahmet Coleman, which is about the book. Jeremiah by Charles Mingus. And again, if you listen to these, a lot of them don't have words. They're ideas. So hip-hop music, which you wouldn't associate with the Bible. I Can by Nas, it talks about references to several biblical figures, such as Joseph in his coat of many colors from the book of Genesis. Exodus by Mobb Deep, and this is an instrumental track, but if you listen closely, they're speaking Exodus 3:14, in which he reveals his name to Moses, I am. This is in the back of the hip hop. So they're all dancing, partying at a club in New York, and they're hearing what Jehovah said to Moses. Land of Canaan, Lauryn Hill, and it's all about the journey, the Israelites' journey. 40 Days and 40 Nights by Murs, and it's all about Noah's Ark and the flood. Same with Noah and the Flood by Chris One, and it's again another story about that. So these people who are listening to secular music are being taught about biblical principles. Not as clear as if they read the Bible, I understand that, but it's still about the impact of the Hebrew Bible. There's some Latin music inspired by the Hebrew Bible. I don't know, do you know of any? Yes, so there's a lot of them. Forgive my pronunciation. Pedro Nava, and that's about Samson and Delilah. Psalm 150 is Psalm 150. Yo soy. What does that mean? I am. And that's about the biblical passage. El Jardín, and that's about the Garden of Eden and the story of Adam and Eve. Yeah, and what's the last one? Yo como es el, and that's about David and Goliath as described in the book of Samuel. So this comes to us in our different groups. I remember one thing from a musician I really admired. Religion is for those who fear hell. Spirituality is for those who've been there. It's David Bowie. Religion keeps, when people use religion as a control, that's what we're talking about. But true faith and spirituality gives us power and gives us, courage. And that's what David was saying. I don't know if you ever saw him at one of his big live concerts that was supporting Live Aid or one of those big concerts, worldwide concerts, when he stops in the middle of the concert and he says the Our Father prayer, which for a rock star, you're like, what the heck happened there? And so that's that. So I'm going to show a video in a moment, Seth, just to give you a heads up. But in summary, the impact of the Hebrew Bible is enormous, and we can get into the little cracks and crevices around the world, but the stories and themes of the Hebrew Bible are wide-reaching throughout music and all of art, not just music. And the works range from the very religious and praise to the secular, and you don't even know that you're hearing about it. Someone's trying to tell you about something. And these impacts have existed since the Hebrew Bible was written. And so when you consider that, the growth has been exponential. The teachings have impacted many people in ways that they're not even aware. They're not tracing it back to the Bible. They're unaware, but it's giving them righteous teachings. So that impact has been over 3 millennia, and it continues to grow, and it makes me feel glad about the world in some ways, that some people still think of these subjects, because religion has been given a bad name, and usually the men who run religion are the real problems. If you ever want to contact us about anything, not just about this talk, Patty and I are at United Israel Northeast, one word, at gmail.com, and we'd love to talk with you and fellowship with you in any way we can. And like I said, at 7 o'clock, we're going to do, I don't know, 15 or 16 songs with Tammy and Andy Box, and Patty and I, and just songs that are of this ilk, not outright. Well, there's one or two outright kind of praise songs, but there's a lot of these songs like Hallelujah that are just the thoughts that Cohen had, or Dylan or somebody. All right? So, Mr. Seth, are you ready? All right.
Eli, Eli, Sheloi kamer leolam, hakol vehayam, rishru shel hamayim, belak hashmayim, filat Adam, hakol vehayam, rishru shel hamayim, belak hashmayim, filat Adam. My God, may these things never end. The sand and the sea, the waves breaking free, the lightning in the sky, and man's humble prayer. Hakol vehayam, rishru shel hamayim, belak hashmayim, filat Adam, belak hashmayim, filat Adam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. wanted to add that we went to Israel to film, not knowing anything about time, and we were supposed to film it on a Monday. And Yehoshua had a video shoot that went over, so we did it on that Tuesday. And we finished at her graveside, and we read the Hebrew date of her death. And we filmed it 75 years to the day of her execution. And we did not plan that. I'm telling you, we didn't plan that at all. It was by the grace of God, the powers of the Most High. We saw young kids crying around her grave and being taught about her. We're like, why are they here? Because it was the 75th anniversary of her death. And she wasn't a warrior, she was a poet. But that's what happens when people try to do things like the Holocaust. Poets have to grab up guns and fight. And I think of her never giving up what they were doing. And it's just total honor and respect for this woman who was a reluctant warrior. Thank you all. And if you want to be here at 7, we'll play some music. Thank you.